Welcome to Hospitality Connection, the podcast where we bring together hospitality experts, innovators, and leaders to share insights, strategies, and stories from the world of hotels, restaurants, and beyond. Each week, Scott Samuels and Alex Gould, your hosts, dive into the latest trends, challenges, and opportunities in hospitality, giving you practical insights and inspiration to thrive in today's industry. Let's connect, learn, and grow together. This is Hospitality Connection.
I first met Alissa Thomas 11 years ago at a South Beach hotel when we were interviewing for our regional director of operations position for our Southeast office for Horizon Hospitality. There was something about Alissa that made me believe she'd be an excellent fit for our company. Alissa's standards are exceptionally high, and she never shies away about speaking up and offering her opinion when something can be improved. Her approach is always thoughtful and focused on driving excellence. Whether she's coaching a team, refining a process, or leading a high-stakes search, Alissa brings a level of dedication and integrity that sets the bar for everyone around her. We truly are lucky to have her on our leadership team, holding all of us to the same high standards that she holds for herself. Alissa is now part owner of Horizon Hospitality and has recently been promoted to Vice President of Recruiting, overseeing the entire recruiting team with the same intensity, passion, and discipline she's embodied since day one. And with that, we'd like to welcome Alissa to the Hospitality Connection.
Thanks, Scott. That was very ceremonial. I was expecting some kind of badge of honor to be given to her. Well done. I was taken aback. So that's quite an accomplishment. I started here recently, so this was all somewhat relatively new to me. But wow, Alissa, you've had quite a career here with Horizon and Scott. How did you get started in hospitality recruiting?
Well, first, thank you so much for having me on the podcast today. I'm really excited. This is actually my first podcast that I've ever done. So I guess a lot of ceremony in a lot of different ways. But in terms of kind of how I got into recruiting, it was really by chance. So at that point in my hospitality career, I had been a restaurant manager for about 8.5 years, and I had a 1-year-old daughter. And I knew I wanted to transition out of operations because my husband was a restaurant general manager at the time, but I didn't really know how to make that transition work. I just knew that I wanted to do something else, but almost didn't know what I could be qualified for because all I ever knew was restaurants and hospitality. But my husband, so his info had actually been in the database with Horizon Hospitality. He was considered for a position, I think a few years back, and he actually ended up receiving an announcement from the team letting him know about a new Florida office that they were going to be opening. And Larry let me know, and he thought it could be a really good match for me. And frankly, I didn't know if I was going to be qualified, but I threw my hat in the ring and I applied. And I guess my sparkling personality made up for the rest.
So I think it's funny. I don't think anyone naturally goes to school and graduates and says, I really want to become a recruiter. Scott, have you ever gotten someone that out of school has approached you? I want to be a recruiter. This is what I want to do. Or is it all, people that are, tired of working 15, 16 hours a day and want some more family time? And so the same thing that Alissa's mentioned.
Yeah, I think it's almost, until you're recruited by someone else, you really don't understand what recruiting's all about. So I think it's something that takes course over time, and nobody graduates with a degree in recruiting, but it's common for people to graduate with a degree in hospitality, which is what Alissa did.
Yeah. Same for me. So Alissa, what keeps you passionate about hospitality recruiting and this industry?
I think it's really just who I am at my core, even if that sounds cheesy. I mean, my first job was a food runner in a restaurant. Like Scott said, I went to school for hospitality, and I've really just always had a passion for service and the industry as a whole. And I think I got really lucky that I sort of found my calling early on. So for me, it's honestly not that hard to stay passionate about because I actually care about, this industry and, what I've been doing for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm sorry. I know that you got really high standards for presenting candidates. And we always go into this saying, if we're going to present a candidate, our expectation is that the client is going to be interested in them. But when you're assessing candidates, what traits consistently separate the good hires from the great ones? What do you see?
Honestly, for me, it's about personality. I've seen the most amazing resumes, and then you get them on the phone and the conversation is the equivalent of like a limp handshake. And our industry is really different than a lot of others from a recruiting standpoint because a title or a certification really doesn't necessarily mean somebody's qualified. And on the flip side, I've seen people that are a lot more junior in their career, but their energy and their drive can really kind of edge them out past more senior candidates. So when I get them on the phone, I typically know in the first few minutes, I'm like, this person's going to be right for the job. And I can just tell by how I connect with them and how they present themselves.
Can you put that up in a phone conversation, or do you think you need to be like visual in a Zoom meeting?
Either or, I mean, it's really important to hear the way somebody reflects themselves. I mean, now that technology is on our side, it's been really great to do a lot more kind of in this type of face-to-face interaction. It does really help build rapport, especially from a client standpoint. I've loved that we've transitioned to most of our client conversations being virtually because I think you just have a better connection with people. So I think there's a lot of value in both ways, but it definitely needs to be some sort of a true interaction, let it be via video or phone.
Yeah, I think
Great.
a resume can be a really powerful tool for someone and the demise for others if it's not written well.
Yeah.
So when you come across candidates on both sides, with a resume that's perfect, glowing, but to your point, that limp handshake of a presentation on themselves, how do you convey to the client, this is, on paper, great, but they're pushing for him, they want him or her. How do you talk them out of it?
So the biggest thing is really establishing that trust with the clients. That comes from when you're initially speaking with them, really getting a true understanding of what they're looking for and relaying that back. So that way they understand you truly know what it is they're seeking for their position or organization. And then sending candidates that are in line, with what they're looking for. And then when you get to that outlier person, it's a lot easier to say, look, I know this person looks a little different on paper, but trust me, like, you want to talk to this person. I know what I'm talking about, so to speak. And because I have sort of that track record to back it up, they're usually a lot more receptive to, you know what, let me see. I hired you for a reason. Let's see what this person is all about. And it's been very, very rare that I've gone to bat for a candidate and the client completely disagreed. So usually they're like, okay, thank you so much. I'm really glad that you encouraged me to speak with him or her.
Yeah. Now, is there a trait people think matters, but it really doesn't when you're talking to a candidate?
So this is just my opinion, and I'm probably going to get some flack for it, but I don't think having a college degree really makes that much of a difference in regards to the quality of a candidate for most positions in hospitality. I mean, there's always outliers. We're talking about finance or other components, but I really feel like years of experience can mean so much more. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm really proud of my degree. I love the school I went to, and it really helped me along the way. But when it comes to what I've learned over the years and when I evaluate really kind of how I got here, I truly feel that the in the field experience, so to speak, really shaped me as a manager and an employee much more than those 4 years that I had in university.
Okay. Really good. How do you evaluate, though, the intangibles like empathy and cultural fit, during the interview process? Because those are things that companies always are looking for. How do you determine if they're going to be a good fit?
The culture fit. It's like the ever moving puzzle piece that you hear from every client. And the most important thing that we can remember as recruiters is that it's not about who I might like or who I would want to work side by side with, but it's really about who's going to mesh with the client the best and really make an impact for their business and really being able to kind of step away about my preferences versus theirs. So every single company is different in terms of what they need from an employee. So the challenge isn't really about evaluating those intangibles, but really making sure that we understand what the client's wanting and needing from those candidates. So if you really have a true understanding of, what the client's looking for and the goals of this role, not just, over their first week, but what are they going to be doing over the first 3, 6 months, 12 months? Well, how are they really going to make an impact to the business? It makes identifying those traits a lot easier. For instance, I'm working with a repeat client for this general manager position, and it's been a struggle for a variety of reasons. And despite never really struggling in this market currently, and what they're wanting from a culture piece is very specific and almost hard to articulate. We used to call it the sparkle at Hillstone, like you know it when you see it. And after I interviewed this candidate recently, I knew in my gut he was everything that they wanted, just the way he spoke, the way he cared, his motivators. And that was one of those kind of examples I went to bat and I told my client, this is the guy. Like, I know there's been issues, but this is going to be the guy. And luckily, I usually know what I'm talking about. So here we are a few weeks later, and I actually sent him his offer letter last night. So
Oh,
in the
wow, that's
long run, it
amazing.
worked out.
So if it's
Awesome.
not
That's
repeat client, say it's, a brand new client that you haven't worked for, how do you find that culture piece? How do you identify, those intangible pieces that aren't written on a job description that may be very difficult for, a company's HR team to express to you?
That's actually usually the first question that I ask to clients, a new one in that conversation. It's not just tell me what you're looking for or why this position is open, but it's usually, we've done a lot of research, I've read through everything, but tell me more about this position, about what you're not going to see on a resume. Really tell me about what you're hoping to see from a personality standpoint from those that have been really successful in your organization. Or on the flip side, the people that haven't worked out, what was it about those individuals that kind of created that disconnect for you? And really hearing it from them sometimes helps kind of formulate everything because they can't always put it into words. But I'd like to think that, from what they share, that we're able to put it together. Also, anytime we have sort of that intake call with a client and really getting to know the position, we always follow it up with a really summarized email saying, hey, this is everything we're going to be looking for from both a tangible and an intangible standpoint to show them I was listening, I got it. Let's all make sure we're on the same page. So that way you're excited when those candidates come across your desk.
You brought up a question that you would ask a client to determine their culture, but are there any questions that you would suggest the candidate would ask that company to really get a better understanding if they're going to be a good culture fit?
I mean, from a culture side, it can really vary from position to position, but in general, I think it's really great when candidates do turn the interview process around on the clients. I think people forget sometimes that an interview is both ways. It's not just for the company to determine whether or not the candidate makes sense, but whether or not the organization aligns with the candidate themselves and, if they're going to be able to provide enough of a platform to help them achieve their own personal and professional goals. With that, though, I usually have them, I need to redo this. I got lost on my question. I'm so sorry.
Just give it
So
a
we'll have
second
to
and
do a
pick up
pause
where
here.
you left off. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Scott, will you re-ask the question?
You had shared a question that you would ask when evaluating a client's culture, but what type of questions could a candidate ask
Okay.
to really determine if they're going to be a good fit for that company based on their culture?
So I really think it can vary from position to position, but it's really great to turn the interview around on the client because the interviews can really go both ways. I mean, it's not just for whether or not this candidate makes sense for the company, but does this company make sense for the candidate? And I usually ask them or recommend they ask, why that person continues to work there. What keeps them passionate and motivated about their job versus wanting to jump ship and take another opportunity. Another great question could be how they ended up taking the job. Did they apply? Were they recommended by somebody? But really trying to understand whoever you're speaking with, their motivators for staying for that company, I think can really help see if those reasons align with why the candidate might want to be also a part of that organization.
Do you find that conversation is difficult to have when we're in like an employer market versus a candidate market because there's some desperation on either side depending on what the current market looks like and people's approach to it because could be job seekers who haven't had a job in a year and they're going to say
Yeah.
whatever it is that they want to say to get that role. So how do you weed through that?
I mean, what I've learned over time is that people may not always tell you the truth and often do tell you what you want to hear. So, and being with the company now for 11 years, I've definitely seen all sides of it, the candidate market, the client market. But the biggest thing I think sometimes with that is to look for consistency, finding out why somebody's motivated to make a change. And kind of, that's something we dig into at the beginning when we're talking to a candidate about why are you looking for a change? Why could this role make sense for you? And continually talk about that X, Y, and Z throughout the entire process, reminding them this is why you wanted to join this company
Yeah.
potentially. This is why you're excited. I know you might have another offer in front of you, but this is going to give you, either that better quality of life or that increased responsibility to where maybe they don't just take the first thing in front of them and really help them realize why this is better for the long term versus just taking something in front of you when you're sort of, let's say, desperate for that next job.
That's great. I couldn't agree more. Now, if on that that same line of thought, if you could give hiring managers one tip to improve their process and what they're doing right now, what would that be?
Sometimes it's really about talking to everyone and giving them a chance to prove themselves. Every day I have to review dozens and dozens of resumes, so obviously I need to be able to make quick decisions about whether or not somebody on paper is qualified. But a lot of times I get sort of the maybe candidates where I'm like, so there's something I see that I like, but I'm really not sure if this person is going to be right. Whenever I have those maybes, I always speak to them. There's been so many candidates that I am so happy that I spoke to because I was a little on the fence with their experience, or maybe they were a couple years shy of what the client was wanting. And like I mentioned earlier, their personality just really made that difference. Or I've noticed some people are terrible at writing resumes, and what they have on there maybe hasn't been updated in a while, or it's not really highlighting what they're truly doing or bringing to the table. So personally, I'd rather waste my time talking to a candidate that's unqualified or not going to be right than accidentally miss out on a candidate, for that reason. So I always encourage clients to speak to everybody. I'm not asking you to hire them, but there's a reason why you hired us. So if we're presenting somebody to you, you should definitely talk to them and get an understanding of why we're representing them.
I think it's a really good point. And I think, I guess selfishly speaking, that's what makes Horizon a little different. I've been on the flip side and have been a client of recruiting firms, and I could tell when they haven't read a resume or haven't spoken to a candidate. So how do you teach your team and lead your team to follow that example? Because that is, I think, what sets us apart and what gives us such an edge when we work with our clients.
Just to clarify, when you're saying, what do we teach people in terms of getting them
Like
to get the clients to talk to us?
You lead a team of recruiters here
Yeah.
at Horizon, and not everyone has that approach to recruitment because it's so busy and
Yeah.
so noisy, and there's so much activity of resumes coming through your inbox at any given point. There's a lot of motion, but what you said is nothing that I've ever heard a recruiter say before, right? You said, I'm going to waste my time talking to people that may be unqualified.
Yeah.
99% of recruiters are going to look at a resume, say unqualified, probably don't even respond to them and move on, leave them and ghost them. So how do you teach that work ethic?
Something I have to teach. I mean, that's part of our culture here at Horizon, and something that I've really, I guess, pushed upon those people that I've been working with for the last 11 years. So I don't know if we really need to try that hard. I mean, I know it's very different, like you said, from what other recruiting firms might do, but that's also, I think, one of the great things that make us different. We're not just resume sorters. We're not just, it's really about talking to everybody in a given market and making sure we're finding the best people for that position. So I think it's a lot of just who we are as a company about always talk to everybody, and you can decide from there whether or not they're going to be right for the position.
Now, on the topic of finding great talent, what's something leaders can start doing tomorrow in their process to better identify great talent out there?
I mean, being open-minded, really, really working hard too. I mean, it's a combination. Life is always about that work-life balance. But for me, I know when there's deadlines or things that need to be done, it's whatever it takes. If it means coming in a little bit earlier or working a little bit late, kind of trying to find that balance and making sure I'm putting in my life as a priority, but also making sure the clients are putting in the priority. Just putting in, I think, that extra work to kind of find those people out there. Because this job is not just about posting a job and seeing for applicants. It's about digging deep into the market. And I think just sometimes doing more than just surface level, kind of really helps people be successful.
So where do you see hospitality hiring going in the next couple of years? We have a lot of AI and remote work happening. I know I even made a post on LinkedIn recently about people reorganizing their organizational chart to allow marketing people, reservationists to work from home or remotely. And I think that's going to be a big change. Where do you see it going?
So I know that AI and tech really needs to obviously be embraced. It's our future, whether or not we like it. But I guess more of my hope is for a back to basics mentality, where we're really putting the focus back on overall service and human interaction. You can't run the hospitality industry without people. So I really hope that we don't lose touch with the foundation of our industry. And I think there's definitely certain components or segments that are great to be able to be remote. But at the same time, what really makes our industry different is that human connection and really having a person take care of you versus a technology service.
Hey, Alyssa, after 11 years of being part of Horizon Hospitality, when you reflect back on all of your experiences, is there one success story you could think of that comes to mind that you want to share?
So a little hard to pick, I guess, just one, but I'd probably go back to maybe 2019. So we were working on this major RPO with an international client of ours who was growing at a rapid pace, and they wanted to hire 750 employees over the course of a few months. And at the time, we didn't quite have the manpower for something of that caliber. So within the span of about, I think it was like 10 days, we ended up hiring 30 temporary employees, creating SOPs. We rented out like half the floor of a Regis space and created all of those necessary training documents within like a week and a half. And it was pretty nuts, but we somehow pulled it off. And, unfortunately, about 6 weeks into the project, there were some issues on the client's end. So they had to pause on the project. But during that time, we were able to get close to 200 people hired. So honestly, I'm really proud of our efforts that we put into that. I mean, Scott, you were a huge part of that project, and I wouldn't have been able to do that without you. But the fact that we were able to just put our heads together and make it work so quickly, I think that was a huge achievement. And even though it's been 6 years, it's something that I'm still really proud of.
I think about that kindly, and also having PTSD from that whole experience. It was something that I'm glad we did, and it was a tremendous undertaking. And I guess that really goes to show that nothing is impossible for us. I mean, we'll always evaluate things, and sometimes they may sound nuts, but if it's in the best interest of the client, if it's in the best interest of our company, we're going to make that decision to move forward. And that's what we did there. So yeah, that's a great example.
So that was, I'm sorry, 240 placements in how long?
It was about 200 hires in 6 weeks.
6 weeks. How much sleep did you get?
Not a lot. I think I was running on adrenaline and coffee for about 6 weeks, 7 weeks straight.
We all were.
Very impressive. Sure. Well, Alissa, thanks so much for coming on today. We really appreciate you sharing your insights. And hopefully we'll have you on again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And this was a lot of fun.
Awesome.
Thank you, Alissa.
Thank you for tuning in to Hospitality Connection. We hope you found today's conversation insightful and inspiring. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and connect with us on LinkedIn and other social channels to keep the conversation going. Join us next week for more insights, stories, and strategies from the hospitality industry, because when we share knowledge, we all grow. Until then, stay connected and keep elevating hospitality.